So in this video I want to kind of show you a different method for generating a normal map, because sometimes your normal doesn't quite work out, or you start off with a Z-sphere like this inside of ZBrush. So what we're going to do first is we're going to open our geometry tab, and if I click polyframe here, you're going to see that this guy's pretty high. He's actually 393,000 polys, and that's not something you'd have in a game, is a skull this high. So what we're going to do is, there's a button here in the new version of ZBrush called Remesher. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. Now you have all these options under Q Remesher. What I normally do is I take this down to 0.1, which is pretty small, and then I hit Q Remesher. It'll actually remesh your skull, and it looks pretty awesome. And it'll take it down to it'll make it all quads, and it'll actually follow the topology of your sculpt. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this, and when I get back you'll be able to see the lower poly version. Okay, so you can see here that this is still pretty high. It's 1,000 something polys, but it did a beautiful job of holding on to the shape of my skull. We can try it at an even smaller than a target count 1, but I think that looks pretty good. And what you can actually do is, at this point, is you can actually sculpt out a little bit more if you want, or whatever you might need. But I think this is good for now for the demo. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to go ahead and export this, and I'm going to save it as skull_low. And then I'm going to hit Control Z a couple times until I get this guy back. And I'm actually going to export this as skull_high. And I'm going to hit save. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and open Maya and import in both of these skulls. So I'm going to pause the video from here. Okay, so what you want to check before you import is you want to go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, and go to Plugin Manager. And you want to make sure that you have OBJ to export on. So you can see here mine is not on, so I have to turn that on, hit close. And like I said, I'm going to go ahead and import in the high and the low. So let's start with the high, and I'm going to hit import. And the reason I'm doing this is, the next step when we take it into XNormals, you want to make sure that the high and low models line up right on top of each other. So you could obviously tell that's the high. So I'm just going to make a new layer and add that to this layer. And then I'm going to do File, Import. And I'm going to select my skull low. So let's make a new layer, and let's open our outliner. So skull low, and I'm going to add that here. So let's go ahead and hide that. So you can see they sit right on top of each other, which is cool. Now you would, more likely than not on your low, you would go in here, especially if it's a game model, and just double click some of these edges and delete them. Because it's not necessary to have, again, like this many edges, but you can see from the Z Remesher, it did such a beautiful job remeshing it. I mean, like, it's perfectly quadded out and it looks fantastic. So for now I'm going to leave it a little high so you can see my method for unwrapping. And again, remember, we took this out of ZBrush, so it's not unwrapped. So I'm just going to go to Window, UV Texture Editor. And I'm going to go to, you can see when you click on it, the UVs are deleted, so we're going to double click the face, all the faces, and I'm going to shift right click, and I'm going to map it on the Z axis, which is this forward facing axis. I'm going to right click, go to edge mode, and double click this edge down the middle. This is the edge down the middle. You can see it run an edge all the way down. I'm going to hold Control and just deselect from this chin here. Maybe I'll go all the way up to here. Till about somewhere around the middle of the forehead. Then I'm going to shift right click in here and go to Cut UVs. Select all these UVs. Then I'm going to shift right click again, or I'm sorry, Control right click again, and go to Shell to make sure I got all of them. Now shift right click here, go to Unfold. And what that does is it gives you sort of a generic unfold. Then I'm going to shift right click again, go down to Smooth UV Tools, and I'm going to unfold this until it doesn't allow me to. Alright, so what we want to do at this point, I'm going to hit E to rotate. Alright, I'm going to scale this up. and hit E to rotate. And you can see that, I mean, that's mapped out pretty perfectly. Alright, I'll hit R, scale this down a little bit. And just to make sure, I'll click on the faces here. And you can see there's the front, there's the top. And again, what's nice about already having this unwrapped, if I go in and just sort of remove edges that I don't need, and I usually do this process after I've created the normals and stuff, and I hit delete edge, you can see it still updates in the unwrap. Alright, so now that we have that, what I'm going to go ahead and do is do File, Export Selection, and I'm going to export over my skull low and my skull high out of ZBrush, out of Maya, because what happens is there's sizing differences between ZBrush and Maya. So you have to sort of go through this step, otherwise you'll get an error saying that the object is too small when you bring it into XNormal. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and start XNormal. You can get XNormal online for free, just do a search for XNormal. But I'm going to go ahead and pause the video because it's going to be a second while it's exporting. Okay, so I went ahead and opened XNormal, and this program's pretty easy to use. One thing I want to point out though is because my object is really faceted here, it's actually going to create a faceted normal map. What I mean by that is it's all hard edges, so you want to make sure that you shift right click, soften it again, so that your object is soft, it has a softened edge. Otherwise you're going to get hard edges in your normal map coming out of XNormal. So I'm going to wait to export this because I want you to see what that looks like. So I'm going to go to High Definition Mesh, right click, Add Mesh. I'm going to navigate to that skull folder on the desktop. Oops, sorry, let's go Desktop, Skull, Skull High. I'm going to go to my Low Definition Mesh, right click, Add Meshes, Skull Low. And then I'm going to go down to Baking Options. I want to turn on Normal Map and Ambient Occlusion. And I want to go pretty high here, so we'll go 1024 by 1024. You can go bigger if you want. And I'm going to hit Generate Maps. Oh, and we got to save it. So I'm going to make sure that I'm still in that skull folder, which I am. And in the texture folder, I'm going to go ahead and name this as I'm going to render out some JPEGs. And I'll name this Skull. And I'll let it add normal and ambient. So I'm going to generate maps. And you'll see this box pops up, and it loads in both. And again, once it starts generating my my low, you're going to see, let's see, it says the high poly model. So there we go. It still had that same error, but that's okay. You see how it's faceted here? I'm getting all these hard edges. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this. Go back in here with my new one that I just smoothed out. And again, the way I did that is I went to Edge Mode, selected all the edges, Shift right click, Soften, Soften Edge. And I'm just going to do File, Export Selection. And I'm just going to write over that low. Because it doesn't actually, XNormal doesn't really load it into the program. It just references it. So let's close this and let's hit Generate Maps again. And it's going to prompt me to save over the other files. And that's okay. And I do want to write over, and you can see now we get a really beautiful smooth normal and a beautiful smooth AO. Okay, now I'm going to pause the video because I also wanted to squeeze in how to texture your skull inside of Photoshop. So, or you know what, I'll save that for another video. For now, let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and load both of these maps up onto my model so you can see what that looks like. So let's close this out, and I'm going to go ahead and close this out. And at this point, I'm going to right-click Material Attributes. I'm sorry, Assign New Material. And I'm going to go with a blend. And the cool map is the bump. So I'm going to go ahead and find my bump map. And let's go to Skull Low File. Let's click here. I'm going to go to Desktop and Skull, Texture, and Skull Normal. I'm going to hit Open. Let's hit 6. Now the way to really see it is you have to be in high quality mode. And it looks pretty poor. And the reason is, let's right click, go to Material Attributes. And let's go to, again, let's click on our bump map. You want to change this where's that at? Let's go back one. From bump to tangent space normal. You can see now we get a really nice smooth one. And what I'm going to do next is go down to material attributes, go to color, and just for the heck of it, select file, and I'm going to grab that occlusion just to see what that looks like. You can see right off the bat we almost have it textured at this point just from the occlusion and the normal. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and save this as skull low, and well, I guess I can just save it as skull. And at this point, in the next video we'll talk a little bit about how to actually texture this.